The din from the most infamous tavern on the Orion 7 space hub reached its crescendo at 2,300 hours. The meeting of the night and day shift crews created a tumultuous medley of unfamiliar alien tongues and the sharp clinking of glassware. The establishment, simply named the Void's Edge, was a magnet for virtually every species passing through this isolated outpost on the very frontier of settled space. Marcus Kane, a 32-year-old human freighter pilot, leaned heavily against the bar's gleaming crystalline counter. His flight jacket was askew, and his dark hair was a mess from prolonged indulgence in Andromedan whiskey. The golden-brown liquor offered a pleasing burn as it traveled down his throat. Through his increasingly blurred vision, he observed the peculiar collection of creatures surrounding him. In a far corner, a cluster of tentacled Zarians were engaged in a card game, their bioluminescent skin flickering with every wager. Closer to the entrance, two silicon-based granite guards discussed shipping lanes in grating voices that sounded like rocks being pulverized. Another one, Marcus? The six-limbed Pleiadian bartender, Korvac, already had the bottle positioned over Marcus's glass. Marcus made a sweeping gesture with his hand, nearly sending his empty tumbler flying. Why the hell not? Tomorrow, I'm charting a route with cargo to the Horsehead Nebula. Might as well soak up some civilization while I can. The whiskey poured, and with it, Marcus's self-control continued its steady descent. He'd been piloting solitary routes for 3 years now. Ever since his divorce, the profound solitude of deep space had become both his refuge and his torment. Yet here, surrounded by every imaginable alien life form, he paradoxically felt more estranged than ever. You know your biggest issue? Korvac inquired, simultaneously polishing the bar with 2 hands while mixing cocktails with the other 4. You humans are always so excessively dramatic about mating. My kind just disperses spores during the lunar convergence. It's far less complicated. Marcus let out a roar of laughter, a bit louder than necessary. Perhaps you're right. Maybe I'm making this all too complex. He shot up abruptly, lurching slightly as the liquor fully impacted his system. The bar's artificial gravity seemed to waver, though he knew it was merely his compromised perception. Around him, conversations in a dozen different dialects formed a baffling linguistic labyrinth. The universal translator embedded behind his ear was working overtime, occasionally hiccuping and leaving him with unintelligible scraps of alien chatter. He managed to climb atop his bar stool, then stepped onto the bar itself, leaving dirty boot prints on the flawless surface. Hey! Korvac protested, extending several arms to stabilize him. Get down from there before you. But Marcus had already thrown his arms out wide, an idiotic grin plastered across his flushed face. The atmosphere in the bar changed instantly as various species swiveled to watch the inebriated human spectacle. Some laughed or made their species-specific sounds of amusement. Others simply observed with the clinical detachment of xenobiologists studying a peculiar sample. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of undetermined gender. Marcus boomed, his voice echoing across the room. I have an important bulletin to share. A Rielian trader halted a negotiation mid-sentence. The Zirian card game froze. Even the habitually aloof Sinian ambassador lifted her head from her holographic newsfeed. Marcus drew a deep breath, spread his arms even wider, and screamed at the top of his lungs. Who wants to marry me? The declaration resonated through the tavern, magnified by the acoustic engineering designed to suit various hearing ranges. For one drawn-out moment, a profound silence descended. Then, stray chuckles began to propagate through the assembly. A few patrons raised their beverages in a mock toast. Someone cracked a joke in Arcturon that the translator rendered as something about mating season arriving early for the hairless apes. But simultaneously, something else was unfolding, something Marcus in his drunken state failed to recognize. His words, shouted with such intense feeling and volume, had been captured by the bar's emergency communication system, a safety function intended to alert authorities to a cry for assistance. The system, unable to classify his marriage proposal as a genuine emergency, defaulted to its secondary protocol, broadcasting across open diplomatic channels. The universal translator, with its typically efficient incompetence in handling emotional outbursts, had interpreted his phrase not as a drunken antic, but as a formal proclamation transmitted in 17 different languages over several quantum frequencies. His proposal had launched itself into the void. The laughter inside the bar began to dissipate. Marcus, still perched on the counter, his arms outstretched like a prophet of intoxication, did not notice the sudden drop in temperature that permeated the room. The coldness was subtle at first, just enough to make breath visible in the recirculated air. Korvac was the first to react. His 12 eyes widened in unison as he gestured with 3 of his arms toward the room's center. By the 7 suns. A rupture materialized in the very air, a crack in reality that shimmered with crimson energy. The fissure widened, spreading like a wound in the fabric of space-time, offering glimpses of a region that existed nowhere and everywhere, an interdimensional space only the most advanced civilizations had mastered. The portal stabilized into a perfect, swirling circle of red and black power. The temperature plummeted further. Frost began to form on all metal and glass surfaces. Several patrons stumbled backward, some grabbing for concealed weaponry, others merely paralyzed by terror or awe. Through the gateway stepped a figure that instantly commanded absolute and total attention. She was exceptionally tall, roughly 6.5 feet, with skin so pale it appeared to radiate its own inner luminescence. Her hair, as black as the emptiness between stars, cascaded past her shoulders like liquid shadow. She wore armor seemingly forged from compressed starlight and darkness, perfectly fitted yet unbelievably intricate, covered in symbols that were difficult to look at directly. Her eyes, they blazed with a red intensity that made the portal's energy look dim by comparison. But it was her presence that truly silenced the room. She exuded power the way stars emit light, inevitable, crushing, and absolute. Every creature in the bar, regardless of species or level of intoxication, felt it in their core, or their biological equivalents. This was an apex predator, a being who stood at the zenith of her species' evolutionary path. Marcus, still balanced on the bar, blinked repeatedly. The alcoholic haze in his brain momentarily cleared, replaced by a different kind of bewilderment. He had encountered countless alien species in his piloting career, but nothing even remotely like her. She was just humanoid enough to be recognizable, yet alien enough to be utterly terrifying. The Vampire Queen, for that is unequivocally what she was, surveyed the bar with the casual scrutiny of someone who had never once faced a genuine threat. Her gaze swept over the cowering patrons before locking onto Marcus with laser-like focus. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that vibrated in frequencies human ears were not equipped to process. The universal translator struggled, producing words that seemed to reverberate from multiple sources simultaneously. You, she stated, her perfectly sculpted finger leveled at Marcus, have invoked the ancient ritual of matrimonial combat. You have claimed the blood right of joining. Marcus's liquor-addled mind struggled to process this claim. I what? No. I was just... Your utterance was broadcast on the crimson frequency, she interjected, taking one smooth stride forward. The onlookers quickly scattered, creating a clear path for her. The frequency designated for formal pronouncements between royal lineages. You have issued a challenge to anyone who overheard, bidding them to validate their worthiness as your spouse through mortal engagement. That's not what I intended, Marcus stammered, suddenly acutely conscious of his position, standing on a countertop in a stained flight suit, confronting what was clearly royalty from a civilization entirely unknown to him. It was merely a jest. I'm intoxicated. The Vampire Queen inclined her head slightly, her scorching eyes assessing him. The statutes of my civilization are absolute. A challenge, once declared, may not be revoked. You have proclaimed yourself deserving of royal blood, fit to stand as the peer of the House of Eternal Night. This is either supreme conceit or supreme bravery. She advanced and Marcus felt the air temperature dip even lower. His breath now emerged in visible plumes. Around them, numerous patrons had activated various recording devices, sensing an event of historical magnitude, or at the very least, something that would go viral on the galactic networks. I am a nobody, Marcus protested, his voice cracking slightly. I'm just a cargo hauler. I transport excavation gear to the frontier colonies. I am not worthy of anything royal. A trace of a smile touched the corners of her flawless mouth, an expression that somehow intensified her terrifying aura. Then you will perish in the arena, and your presumption will be avenged. But the challenge remains. I am Valyria Night Whisper, third of her line, Queen of the Crimson Moon, Empress of the Dark Nebula, and Guardian of the Blood Laws. And you, little mortal, have summoned me to matrimony. She was close enough now that Marcus could perceive her fragrance, a scent like frozen starlight and aged gore, equally gorgeous and horrifying. His instincts screamed for escape, but he was trapped, standing on a bar, surrounded by aliens, facing a vampire queen from beyond the known cosmos. Please, he tried one final time. This is all a misconception. In human society, drunken individuals say foolish things. We don't mean them. Valyria raised her hand. Without needing to strain, she grasped his chin with fingers that felt like ice-cold steel, compelling him to meet her gaze. In those ruby depths, he saw eons of existence, countless conflicts, and a profound solitude that mirrored his own. In my culture, she whispered, her voice now calibrated for his ears alone, words possess power, particularly words spoken with passion and broadcast to the void. You cried out for a partner with such desperate necessity that it spanned dimensions. The cosmos has answered. She released him and stepped back, addressing the entire bar. Let it be known that the human Marcus Kane has invoked the blood right. In 3 standard days, when the crimson moon ascends over my domain, he shall confront me in the arena of joining. Should he survive, he shall become my husband. Should he fall. She did not complete the sentence. The dreadful implication hung in the air like a poised blade. Marcus managed to find his voice, though it emerged as a faint squeak. And if I decline? Valeria's smile broadened, revealing canine teeth clearly not suited for a herbivorous diet. Then you would prove yourself a coward, unworthy of the very challenge you issued. My honor guard would execute you here and now for the offense. As if commanded, 6 additional figures emerged from the portal. They were clearly vampire combatants, clad in less ornate armor than their queens. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, taking up tactical positions around the tavern. No one dared to stir. Marcus's thoughts raced. He glanced around at the faces of beings he'd shared drinks with for months. None moved to intervene. This was beyond their authority, beyond their capabilities. He had inadvertently plunged into something ancient and terrible. And now he had no choice but to follow through. 3 days? He asked, his voice marginally steadier. 3 days, Valeria confirmed. ***, my vessel awaits. You will accompany me willingly or you will come in chains. But you will come. The blood laws must be fulfilled. She pivoted and walked toward the portal, her movement captivatingly graceful. At the threshold she paused, looking back at him one last time. I advise you to sober up, Marcus Kane. You will require all your intelligence for what lies ahead. It has been 7 centuries since anyone challenged me to matrimonial combat. The last one lasted 30 seconds. With that chilling pronouncement she vanished through the portal. Her guards remained, plainly expecting Marcus to follow. The portal hummed with eldritch energy, a doorway to a destiny he could never have conceived when he started drinking that night. Marcus looked down at Korvac, who was staring up at him, all 12 eyes wide with disbelief. I don't suppose, Marcus said faintly, you have any guidance for fighting vampire royalty? Korvac slowly shook his head. ***, my friend, you just proposed to one of the most lethal entities in known space. My only counsel, write your last will and testament. Marcus closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and stepped down from the bar. His legs felt like jelly, whether from the whiskey or the terror he couldn't tell. The vampire guards flanked him as he walked toward the gateway, each step feeling like a march to his execution. At the opening he hesitated. The portal's energy made his skin unpleasantly tingle. Through it he glimpsed a new environment, a ship's interior that resembled a Gothic cathedral built from black obsidian and crimson crystal. One question, he murmured to the nearest guard. Has anyone ever actually prevailed in one of these matrimonial combats? The guard's face was concealed by a helmet, but Marcus could hear the smirk in his voice. ***, once. 2 millennia ago, a warrior from the Andromedan Empire endured a full hour before the queen claimed his head. It is still on display in our hall of failed suitors. Wonderful, Marcus mumbled. He briefly considered fleeing. He considered pleading. He thought about all the decisions in his life that had culminated in this moment. Standing drunk in a space station bar, about to follow a vampire queen through a portal to near certain demise. Then he thought about his empty ship, his vacant quarters, the endless void stretching ahead, hauling dull cargo to nowhere. At least this would be interesting. At least this would be an ending worth recalling. Well, he said to no one in particular, I did ask who wanted to marry me. And with that, Marcus Kane, cargo pilot, divorcee and accidental suitor to vampire royalty, stepped through the portal into a fate beyond his wildest imaginings. Behind him, the portal collapsed with a sound like reality sighing. The bar immediately erupted in pandemonium as patrons rushed to transmit the news across the galaxy. Within hours, the narrative would be ubiquitous. A drunk human had inadvertently proposed to the vampire queen of the Dark Nebula, and she had accepted. The odds makers were already taking wagers. No one was betting on Marcus. The transition through the gateway felt like being turned inside out while simultaneously frozen and set ablaze. Marcus's stomach churned as reality folded around him, with unnamed hues flaring across his vision before everything snapped back into sharp focus with jarring suddenness. He found himself in a vast chamber that defied standard architecture. The walls curved impossibly, constructed of what appeared to be black glass streaked with veins of pulsating red light. The ceiling stretched up into absolute darkness, occasionally illuminated by crackling energy that danced between crystalline formations. The floor beneath him was polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflecting distorted images of himself into infinity. Welcome to the Bloodstone Pinnacle, one of the guards said, removing his helmet to reveal features that were nearly human, save for pronounced canines and eyes that glowed with a faint crimson light. Your residence for the next 3 days. My cell, you mean? Marcus corrected, attempting to keep the quiver out of his voice. The guard, who looked to be no older than 25 but likely had centuries on Marcus, offered a smile devoid of warmth. Her Majesty prefers to refer to it as preparatory accommodations. You are, after all, a potential royal consort. It would be improper to treat you as a common detainee. They led him through corridors that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The architecture itself felt alive, responding to their presence with subtle adjustments in illumination and temperature. Other vampires passed them in the halls, some in armor, others in flowing robes cut from shadow. All of them stared at Marcus with expressions ranging from mere curiosity to open hunger. Tell me, Marcus said, partly to distract himself from their stares. What exactly does this matrimonial combat involve? Weapons, rules? Any chance of a pleasant game of chess instead? The lead guard chuckled. You genuinely do not comprehend what you have done, do you? The blood rite of joining is our most hallowed rite. When our queen reaches her 1000th year, she must select a mate to secure the continuation of the royal line. But power acknowledges only power. Any consort must prove their worth through combat. And I accidentally challenged her to this? Your words, broadcast on our sacred frequency, were interpreted as a formal declaration. You essentially announced to our entire civilization that you deem yourself worthy of our queen's hand. Such arrogance demands a response. They arrived at a set of doors that appeared to be carved from a single massive ruby. The guards propelled the massive doors open, revealing a suite that was unquestionably lavish, yet unmistakably a gilded prison. The main chamber was circular, featuring windows that provided a view that instantly made Marcus dizzy. The world below was radically unlike anything in human space. It was suspended in a void that felt more intense than mere emptiness. The darkness was too profound, disrupted only by nebulae that swirled in patterns that appeared almost biological. The planet itself was cloaked in crimson mist, with sporadic glimpses of dark landmasses and oceans that failed to reflect any light. 3 moons performed an intricate celestial ballet, each radiating a different shade of red. The dark nebula, Marcus whispered involuntarily. I thought it was only a myth. Many concepts you categorize as mythology are quite real, the guard stated. Rest. Your instruction begins tomorrow. Instruction? Marcus turned away from the window. I get training? Her Majesty insists, the guard confirmed. She takes no satisfaction in the slaughter of the unprepared. You will receive tutelage in our combat techniques, though 3 days is scarcely enough time to master what we acquire over centuries. The guards exited, and Marcus heard the distinct clunk of heavy locks engaging. He was entirely alone in an alien fortress, on a planet that should not exist, awaiting a fight against a being from humanity's darkest legends. He inspected his quarters, discovering a sleeping chamber with a bed that resembled an altar, a washroom with unfamiliar fixtures, and what seemed to be a meditation area where the symbols covering the walls appeared to shift whenever he glanced away. Everything was exquisitely crafted, elegant, and profoundly inhuman. Sleep felt unattainable, but the combination of exhaustion and the remnants of the alcohol eventually claimed him. His slumber was filled with images of scorching red eyes and the sound of wings that never quite manifested. He awoke to the noise of his door being unlatched. The vampire queen stood in the doorway. She had exchanged her armor for a flowing gown that looked woven from starlight and congealed blood. In the peculiar illumination of the vampire world's dawn, if the mere transition of the sky from black to deep crimson could be called dawn, she appeared even more ethereal. You are awake, she noted, entering without permission. Good. We have much to discuss. Marcus sat up quickly, acutely conscious that he was still in his rumpled flight suit from the night before. Your Majesty, he said, unsure whether bowing was appropriate for addressing vampire royalty from a bed. She waved a hand dismissively. In 3 days you will either be my husband or you will be dead. Such formality seems unnecessary. She moved to the window, gazing out at her realm. Tell me, Marcus Kane, why did you cry out into the void? I was drunk, he answered honestly. And lonely. And foolish. She turned to face him, her red eyes seeming to penetrate his very being. The universe does not respond to foolish cries. There was genuine truth in your declaration, even if you did not intend it. You are empty inside. I can sense it. A hollowness that resonates. Marcus had no reply for that observation, so he remained silent. I am familiar with that emptiness, she continued, turning back to the window. I have reigned as queen for 7 centuries. I have governed justly, expanded our dominion, and brought prosperity to my citizens. And yet, she trailed off. And yet you're lonely too, Marcus finished softly. A faint smile ghosted across her lips. Perhaps that is why the cosmos directed your plea to me. Two hollow souls calling out in the darkness. That's very poetic, Marcus said. But it doesn't change the fact that you intend to kill me in 3 days. Yes, she agreed simply. Unless I kill you first, right? Me, a human cargo pilot, against a 700-year-old vampire queen. I'm sure that will go smoothly. She crossed the room with that inhuman velocity, suddenly standing directly in front of him. This close, he could see that her beauty was a weapon as potent as any blade, designed to distract, to captivate, to make her prey forget they were prey. You survived the war with the Centauri Republic, she stated. You have navigated ion storms that would tear most vessels apart. You have faced death before. How do you know that? I had you researched overnight. Know your enemy, or in this case your potential spouse. She leaned in closer, causing Marcus's heart rate to surge. You are not as insignificant as you pretend. Flying through perilous space and fighting vampire royalty are subtly different skill sets, he pointed out. Perhaps, but the instinct for survival is universal, she countered. She straightened, moving away as abruptly as she had approached. Your instructors will arrive shortly. I suggest you ready yourself. And Marcus. Yes. Try to last longer than 30 seconds. It would be an embarrassment for both of us. She departed, leaving Marcus alone with his churning thoughts. He took a shower in the alien washroom, figuring out the controls through trial and error. The water, or the red-tinted liquid it seemed to be, felt strange on his skin, leaving him feeling simultaneously refreshed and somehow branded. His flight suit had been replaced with training attire, form-fitting black fabric that felt like silk but moved like armor. He was still assessing himself in the mirror when 3 vampires entered. I am Cashin, the lead instructor announced. He was shorter than the guards but carried himself with the confidence of a veteran who had never tasted defeat. I will endeavor to teach you enough to die with honor. That's wonderfully encouraging, Marcus muttered. The training room was a visual nightmare of alien design. The floor could instantly solidify or give way like quicksand. The walls projected holographic adversaries. Gravity itself seemed adaptable, shifting at Cashin's commands. First lesson, Cashin said, throwing Marcus a blade that looked like crystallized shadow. Everything you believe about combat is incorrect. What followed was 6 hours of utter humiliation. Marcus had considered himself reasonably fit. Cargo piloting demanded physical readiness for emergencies. But the vampires moved like flowing water, struck like lightning, and treated the laws of physics as a mild suggestion rather than an absolute rule. You are thinking like a human, Cashin critiqued after Marcus's 100th failed attempt to land a blow. Linear, predictable. Your species evolved as persistence hunters. You pursue your target until it collapses. We evolved as ambush predators. We attack from the darkness and vanish before the prey even realizes it is dead. Great, Marcus panted, hauling himself up off the floor again. Any chance I can evolve rapidly in the next 2 days? Cashin actually cracked a small smile at that. ***, no. But you can learn to leverage your weaknesses as advantages. You cannot match our speed. But you possess something we lack, unpredictability. We have centuries of conditioning which makes us creatures of habit. You have no habits. Exploit that. The second day was marginally better. Marcus began to pick up on the subtle cues that preceded vampire movements, learning to use the shifting environment to his advantage instead of struggling against it. He was still hopelessly mismatched, but now he could occasionally evade a strike rather than simply enduring it. During a rest period, Cashin offered an unexpected piece of information. You know, there's a reason the Queen chose to answer your summons personally. Beyond the sacred law, the law mandated that someone respond. It did not require it to be her. Any noble-blooded vampire could have accepted the challenge, yet Valeria herself appeared. Curious, isn't it? In 700 years, she has never expressed any desire for a mate. The noble houses have been pressuring her for centuries. Then your drunken proposal echoes across the void, and she immediately replies. That evening, or whatever constituted evening in a world of perpetual twilight, Valeria visited again. This time, she brought what appeared to be dinner, though Marcus was unsure he wanted to know the source of the meat. How is the training progressing? She asked, settling opposite him with inhuman grace. I've mastered 17 different ways to meet a horrible end, Marcus replied. So that's progress, I suppose? She laughed, a sound like silver chimes and shattering glass. Cashin is impressed. He says you have potential. Potential to last perhaps 45 seconds instead of 30. Don't underestimate yourself. She leaned forward, studying him. Tell me about your wife. The question caught him completely off guard. Ex-wife. And why do you want to know? I am intrigued by human relationships. How one can promise eternity and then revoke that promise. Marcus took a sip of whatever she had brought. It tasted like wine but had a distinct aftertaste of iron. Elena and I were together for 7 years. Married for 5. She claimed I loved the stars more than I loved her. She was probably right. I would take any perilous run, any long-haul job. I told myself I was providing for us. But honestly, I just wanted to be out there. And now I realize being out there is just another form of emptiness. But it's too late. She's remarried, has children. The life we were supposed to share. Valeria was silent for a moment. My parents were murdered in the War of Shadows when I was barely 50, a child by our measures. I assumed the throne at 70, she continued, and repelled 6 separate coup attempts before my 100th cycle. I have never had the privilege of choosing love over my obligations. Is that why you've never taken a mate? Marcus asked. Every aspirant who has approached me has coveted my power, not me, she explained. They saw the crown, not the individual. Even in the arena, confronting certain death, they fought for ambition rather than affection. She met his gaze. You are the only one who clearly wishes to be elsewhere. And that is commendable. It is honest. Do you comprehend how rare sincerity is within a royal court? She rose, preparing to depart, then paused at the doorway. Your final instruction is tomorrow. Rest well, Marcus Kane. Regardless of what transpires in the arena, I want you to know this. I am relieved it was your voice that called out to the void. The 3rd day's training was fundamentally different. Instead of combat drills, Cashin educated him on vampire culture, psychology, and vulnerabilities. We are not invulnerable, the instructor clarified. We are swift, potent, and we heal rapidly, but we can be slain. The heart, the spine, the brain. Destroy any of these sufficiently and even a vampire expires. Fire is effective, as is high-voltage electricity. And we possess one susceptibility humans do not. We are creatures of precedent and honor. Utilize that. How can I use honor against someone intent on killing me? Marcus asked. By grasping her motivation. The queen is not merely fighting you. She is battling 7 centuries of tradition, the expectations of her subjects, and her own inherent nature. She is obligated to attempt to kill you because the blood law mandates it. But that does not imply it is her desire. That evening, Marcus stood by his observation window, watching the 3 moons execute their celestial ballet. Tomorrow he would enter an arena and face a being ripped from humanity's darkest folklore. All rational predictions placed him dying swiftly. But as he observed the crimson mists swirling across the alien sky, he reflected on empty spaces and cries into the void. He considered a queen who possessed everything except the one thing that mattered. He thought about his own life, safe, predictable, and utterly devoid of purpose. Perhaps to die for something, even something this utterly insane, was preferable to living for nothing at all. A quiet knock at the door disrupted his heavy contemplation. It was Valeria. This time, she wore simple clothing that made her appear almost but not quite human. Stroll with me, she requested. They roamed the palace's grand corridors, passing portraits of vampire nobility whose eyes seemed to follow them with an inner glow. She showed him trophies from ancient conflicts, weapons that had tasted the blood of now extinct species, and the hall of failed suitors, the very chamber the guard had mentioned. It was a sobering collection of preserved heads, each bearing a plaque detailing their failed attempt to win the queen. Cheery, Marcus commented. A constant reminder, Valeria corrected, of the burden of the crown. They eventually reached a balcony that overlooked the arena. It was colossal, a coliseum large enough to encompass a small city, and it radiated an inescapable aura of brutality and spectacle. Are you afraid? She asked. Terrified, Marcus admitted. But also strangely serene, as though my entire life has led to this moment. Does that make any sense? More than you realize. She moved closer, near enough that he could feel the coldness emanating from her skin. I must tell you something. Tomorrow in the arena I will not hold back. I cannot. My people must witness their queen's absolute strength. But tonight. She kissed him. It was not the casual touch of a predator playing with its prey. It was desperate, ravenous. Centuries of isolation were compressed into a singular moment of connection. Marcus felt his blood ignite, felt her fangs brush his lips, and felt the impossible strength in her arms as she pulled him tight. When they drew apart, her eyes were brighter than he had ever seen them. Tomorrow one of us dies, she whispered. But tonight, just for tonight, let us pretend we are merely 2 beings who answered each other's desperate call across the void. They spent the night conversing, sharing personal histories, and discovering unexpected common ground between a human pilot and a vampire queen. As the crimson dawn began its approach, both knew the pretense had to end. Reality awaited them in the arena. If you prevail, Valeria said as she prepared to leave. "You will be king, the first human to rule vampires. They will challenge you relentlessly. And if you fall, I will possess your memory. The only suitor who arrived not for power but purely by accident. The only one who saw me as something more than a crown." She touched his face gently. "Either way, Marcus Kane, you have already given me something I thought I would never regain." "What is that?" "Hope." She left. Marcus was alone with the looming dawn and the agonizing knowledge that in mere hours, he would face the woman he was beginning to develop feelings for in a lethal duel. The universe, he decided, possessed a severely twisted sense of humor. The arena rapidly filled like a tide of spilled blood as thousands of vampires flowed into the ancient Colosseum. They were arrayed in their finest attire, robes that seemed to drink in the light, armor that gleamed like polished obsidian, and jewelry that pulsed with its own inner fire. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of anticipation that made the very air vibrate with bloodlust. Marcus stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena floor, struggling to stabilize his breathing. The armor provided to him was surprisingly lightweight, a form-fitting black material that Cashin guaranteed would deflect most blades. Though he had added ominously, "Not hers, of course. Nothing turns aside the Night Whisper blade." "Helpful," Marcus muttered. Now, as the crowd's roar intensified, he checked his gear one last time. A sword that felt too light to be effective despite Cashin's assurances. A set of small devices designed to grant momentary tactical advantages. Smoke pellets to obscure vision, electromagnetic disruptors to interfere with the arena's shifting gravity, and flash grenades calibrated for creatures with advanced sight. Tricks and gadgets against centuries of martial perfection. "It is time," Cashin announced, entering the chamber. The trainer's expression was unreadable. ***, recall everything I taught you. Use the environment. Be unpredictable. And whatever you do, do not allow her to dictate the rhythm of the fight. Any final advice on actually winning?" Cashin was silent for a moment. "Survive the first 60 seconds, and you will have already exceeded all expectations. Survive 5 minutes and you will earn respect. Survive 10? He shrugged. "No one survives 10. "You really know how to give a pep talk," Marcus sighed. The platform began to ascend, carrying Marcus up toward the arena floor. The sound of the crowd grew eardrum-shatteringly loud. Through the widening gap above, he could see the crimson sky where all 3 moons had perfectly aligned, apparently an auspicious omen for a matrimonial combat. The arena floor was enormous, easily 300 meters across. The surface looked like polished obsidian, but Marcus knew from his training that it could shift and reconfigure according to the Queen's will. Holographic emitters could conjure obstacles, the gravity generators could create zones of intensified or nullified weight, and concealed ports could release everything from jets of flame to paralyzing mist. As he stepped out into the open, the crowd's roar reached its crescendo. He had never witnessed such a massive assembly of vampires. Thousands upon thousands, their eyes glowing like a constellation of red stars in the darkness of the stands. Banners fluttered in the controlled wind, each representing a noble house that had come to witness their queen's trial by combat. At the far side of the arena, a second platform ascended. Valeria emerged like a war deity. Her armor was magnificent, black as the space between stars, inscribed with red lines that pulsed like veins. It moved with her like a second skin, each segment a masterpiece that was likely forged before humanity even took to the stars. In her hand, she held a blade that seemed to absorb all ambient light, creating a localized pocket of profound shadow wherever it traveled. The crowd fell into an absolute silence as she raised her free hand. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the vast arena without any artificial amplification. "Citizens of the Crimson Moon, today the ancient rite is honored. A challenger has invoked the blood rite of joining." She gestured toward Marcus. "The human Marcus Kane claims fitness to stand as your king. Let the arena prove his claim." The crowd roared its approval. Marcus spotted betting boards along the walls with odds scrolling by. The best odds he saw gave him 20 seconds. Most wagered on less than 10. A figure in elaborate vestments, an official or priest, stepped onto a floating dais. The mandates of matrimonial combat are absolute. Fight until submission or death. No quarter requested, none granted. Should the challenger endure, he claims the throne beside our queen. Should he fall, his blood nourishes the ancient stones. Let none interfere on pain of death. Begin. A deep, resonant gong sounded, and time seemed to decelerate. Valeria moved first, covering half the arena in a single flash. Marcus barely managed to raise his sword in time. The impact of her strike sent a shockwave traveling up his arms. The crowd collectively gasped. He had blocked her initial assault. That, apparently, was already newsworthy. She swiftly spun, her blade slicing from an entirely new angle, and Marcus flung himself sideways, executing a quick roll across the slick floor. He instantly came up running, deploying a smoke pellet behind him. The cloud instantly billowed outward, momentarily obstructing her sight. It afforded him perhaps 2 precious seconds. She erupted through the smoke like a launched missile, her blade sweeping in an arc that would have bisected him had he not immediately activated one of his gravity disruptors. The sudden, localized change in gravitational pull sent him soaring upward just as her weapon flashed through the space he had occupied. The crowd was now fully on its feet. He had survived 15 seconds. Marcus landed with a hard thud, rolling to absorb the kinetic energy. The arena floor began to contort, sections rising violently to create improvised obstacles. He ducked behind one just as Valeria's blade utterly shattered the stone where he'd been moments before. Fragments pelted his protective gear. Think, he commanded himself. I can't match her power or her speed. What is my advantage? Unpredictability. Cashin had hammered the concept into him. Vampires were creatures of deep-seated patterns, even in their movements. Centuries of training established profound behavioral grooves. Marcus, however, had no patterns, no formal fighting style to revert to, only desperation and human tenacity. He pulled out a flash grenade, counting internally. Valeria came around the obstacle, blade raised just as he triggered the device. The burst of light, designed specifically for enhanced vampire vision, was excruciatingly bright across spectrums humans couldn't even perceive. She staggered back, more startled than truly injured, but it was the opening he needed. Instead of retreating, Marcus charged forward, the last thing a predator expects its prey to do. He closed the distance, getting inside her effective range for the long blade, and managed to land a punch on her armored abdomen. It felt like striking the hull of a starship. His hand went instantly numb. But the crowd's surge of noise told him the action was significant. He had actually managed to strike the queen in combat. Valeria's backhand blow caught him across the chest, sending him flying 20 meters. He slammed into the arena floor, skidding another 10 before finally stopping. Everything ached, but he was alive. 30 seconds and counting. Clever, Valeria said, her voice clear despite the distance. Using our ingrained strengths against us. Cashin instructed you well. Marcus struggled to his feet, spitting blood. I'm a quick study, he gasped. She offered a predatory smile. Let's see how quick. The arena floor erupted. Sections surged and plummeted like huge waves on an ocean of stone. Holographic projectors created phantom walls and illusory opponents. Gravity generators fluctuated wildly, turning every single step into a difficult physics problem. And through it all, Valeria pursued him like an elegant nightmare. Marcus sprinted, evaded, utilized every maneuver Cashin had taught him and invented several on the fly. He threw out smoke to hide his movements, used electromagnetic disruptors to create pockets of unpredictable gravity that he could navigate but she couldn't immediately account for. He even managed to exploit her own speed once, dodging at the last instant so her strike shattered one of the arena's environmental projectors, sending a cascade of sparks downward. 1 minute passed, then 2. The crowd's roar had transformed, becoming less bloodthirsty and more rooted in sheer amazement. The betting boards were in turmoil, odds spiking wildly as the impossible continued. The human was still breathing. But Marcus was rapidly losing energy. His specialized armor offered limited protection against impacts that should have fractured unprotected bones. His breath came in jagged, desperate gasps. Blood seeped from a dozen minor cuts where her blade had found crevices in his gear. Valeria, meanwhile, looked as fresh as when they began. You are lasting longer than anticipated, she said, walking with unnerving calm as he desperately scrambled for cover. But this can only conclude in one way. Maybe, Marcus gasped, pulling out his final electromagnetic disruptor. But I have a different proposition. He activated the device and hurled it not at her, but at the arena floor between them. The resulting localized gravitational anomaly was immense, creating a swirling vortex of conflicting forces. The polished floor buckled and cracked. Several nearby projectors sparked and failed. Valeria paused, studying the chaotic gravitational swirl. Destroying the arena will not save you. I'm not trying to destroy it, Marcus retorted, circling the perimeter to keep the disruption between them. Just leveling the field. He pulled out all his remaining tricks, smoke pellets, flash grenades, everything, and threw them into the gravity well. They spun in erratic orbits, creating a dizzying, swirling barrier of light, smoke and electromagnetic interference. It was pure chaos, a maelstrom that even enhanced vampire senses couldn't easily penetrate. For the first time, Valeria looked genuinely intrigued. Creative but ultimately futile. She began to circle the anomaly and Marcus matched her pace. They were locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse around his improvised defense. The crowd had fallen utterly silent, watching this unprecedented exhibition of human ingenuity against vampiric might. 3 minutes. 4. 5. Then Valeria did something entirely unexpected. She laughed. It was a genuine, delighted sound. Do you know what you've accomplished, Marcus Kane? You've made this interesting. It has been centuries since anyone made a matrimonial combat interesting. She raised her blade and darkness flowed from it like liquid shadow. The darkness met his chaotic barrier and simply consumed it, neutralizing the electromagnetic fields, swallowing the smoke and light whole. In seconds, his improvisation was gone, leaving them facing each other across a bare floor. Now, she said, let me demonstrate why I have ruled for 700 years. She didn't seem to move. One moment she was 30 meters away, the next she was simply there inside his guard, her blade resting perfectly against his throat. Marcus froze, feeling the frigid edge against his skin. 6 minutes, she whispered, just loud enough for him. You lasted 6 minutes, longer than any challenger in 5 centuries. The crowd held its collective breath. This was the defining moment, the kill that tradition demanded. Marcus met her burning eyes, seeing in them the same deep loneliness he'd glimpsed the previous night, but also duty, the crushing weight of centuries of tradition. Do it, he said quietly. But I need you to know one thing first. She raised an eyebrow, the blade remaining perfectly still at his throat. I'm glad I made that drunken joke, he stated. I'm glad the universe brought us together, even if it's just for this. You are magnificent, Valeria. You deserve better than centuries of solitude. You deserve someone who sees you, not just your crown. Something flickered in her eyes. The blade trembled infinitesimally. Marcus took a deep breath and did the most utterly insane thing in a day packed with madness. He stepped forward into the blade. The crowd gasped as blood instantly welled from the shallow cut on his throat. But Marcus did not stop. He reached up gently, placing his hand over Valeria's on the sword hilt. I won't fight you anymore, he declared. Not because I'm surrendering, but because I refuse to try to hurt someone I've come to care about. If tradition demands my death, so be it. But I want you to know that last night meant something. You mean something. Not as a queen, but as Valeria. The arena was utterly silent. Thousands of vampires watched their queen stand frozen, blade at her challenger's throat as he essentially proposed to her properly this time. Not with drunken words in a bar, but with quiet sincerity in the absolute face of death. You foolish human, Valeria whispered, her voice thick with an emotion Marcus couldn't name. You beautiful, foolish human. Do you know what you are doing? Probably getting myself killed, Marcus admitted. But if I'm going to die, I want to die as myself, not as some wannabe warrior. I'm just a lonely pilot who called out to the void and found something wonderful. The blade clattered to the obsidian floor. The sound echoed in the silence like thunder. Valeria stepped back, her face a mask of tumultuous, conflicting emotions. The crowd erupted, not in cheers or boos but in pure, bewildered chaos. Nothing of this nature had ever occurred in a matrimonial combat. The challenger refusing to fight, the queen dropping her weapon. Pick up your sword. Valeria demanded, her voice strained. No. Pick it up. The command cracked like a whip, and the arena itself seemed to tremble. This is matrimonial combat. You must fight. I am fighting, Marcus stated calmly. Just not in the manner tradition mandates. I am striving for something fundamentally different. A chance at genuine connection between us. Something not founded on dominance and bloodshed, but on the bond we both sensed. Tell me you didn't feel it too. Valeria's carefully maintained composure fractured. What I feel is irrelevant. The law. The law brought us here, Marcus interrupted, but it doesn't have to dictate our future. You're the queen. If anyone holds the power to enact change, it is you. A voice rang out from the crowd, one of the vampire nobility, boldly stating, this is unheard of. The combat must proceed. Kill him or be killed as the law demands. Others quickly joined the clamor. The arena filled with a cacophony of shouts, some demanding blood, others debating the interpretation of ancient statutes. Through the rising pandemonium, Marcus and Valeria remained fixed, an oasis of stillness amidst the storm. They are correct, Valeria said softly. The law is absolute. One of us must fall. Marcus opened his arms wide. Then let it be me. But know that I willingly face death with affection for you, Valeria Knight whisper. Not as a queen or a symbol, but as the woman who confided her solitude in me last night. She moved then with terrifying vampire speed, and Marcus braced himself for the fatal blow. Instead she kissed him. It was different from the night before, fierce, desperate, and tasting of tears and a trace of blood. When she withdrew, her eyes blazed with clear resolve. You impossible man, she breathed. You have left me no alternatives. She turned to address the multitude, her voice ringing with indisputable royal authority. Citizens of the Crimson Moon, bear witness. The human Marcus Kane has fought with supreme honor. He has survived far longer than any challenger in centuries. More significantly, he has demonstrated courage beyond measure, the courage to relinquish his weapon for a higher objective. The crowd's murmurs intensified, turning to confusion. The law decrees that matrimonial combat must persist until one participant falls, Valeria continued. But it does not explicitly specify that the fall must result in death. She turned back to Marcus. Kneel. Marcus blinked. What? Kneel, you stubborn mortal, and trust me. Marcus slowly complied. Valeria recovered her fallen blade, raising it high above her head. The crowd fell silent once more, anticipating the execution. Instead, she inverted the weapon, driving the point into the arena floor directly beside Marcus. I pronounce this human fallen in combat, she declared. Defeated not by my blade but by love. And as is my prerogative as the victor, I claim him nonetheless, not as a conquered foe but as my chosen consort. Let any who object to this interpretation confront me in single combat. The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then, from the section housing the noble houses, a slow ripple of applause began. It spread gradually as the profound implications sank in. Their queen had located a loophole in their most hallowed tradition. Technically, the combat had concluded. One party had fallen. That the fall was voluntary and the victor chose clemency were unprecedented but not expressly forbidden. Arise, Marcus Kane, Valeria announced formally, though her eyes were alight with something that looked suspiciously like mischief. Arise as my chosen consort, future king of the Crimson Moon. Marcus rose slowly, scarcely believing he was alive. Around them, the crowd's reaction was divided. Some cheered this novel interpretation of ancient law, others muttered about the violation of tradition, but none dared to openly challenge the Queen's declaration. Did we just? Marcus began. We just rewrote 1,000 years of tradition. We did, Valeria confirmed. There will be repercussions, political challenges and maneuvering, but yes, we just proved that sometimes love can conquer even the bloodiest of laws. She took his hand, raising it high. The crowd's roar was now deafening, though Marcus couldn't discern if it was fully approval or simply shock at the spectacle they had witnessed. What happens now? He asked as they stood together in the center of the arena. Valeria smiled, a genuine smile, not the combatant's grin she had worn moments before. Now we begin planning a wedding. A proper one without the mandatory death match. Though I caution you, vampire wedding planning makes mortal combat seem simple. I'll take wedding planning over death matches any day, Marcus said. As they exited the arena together, hand in hand, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at the bizarre turns life could take. 3 days prior, he was an intoxicated pilot making a stupid joke. Now, he was the future king of a vampire empire, walking beside a woman who had gone from trying to kill him to saving him with a kiss and a technicality. The universe, he concluded, certainly had a bizarre sense of humor. But sometimes, just sometimes, it also had a heart. The great hall of the Bloodstone Pinnacle had been dramatically transformed for the wedding rites. Where the stark obsidian walls had once reflected only darkness, thousands of crimson crystals now cast dancing, vibrant light across every surface. The impossibly high vaulted ceiling displayed a projection of the cosmic void where Marcus had first made his accidental proposal, a constant reminder of how fate could hinge on a drunken jest. Marcus stood before a mirror of polished shadow glass, adjusting the collar of his ceremonial armor for the 10th time. The attire was a carefully negotiated blend of human and vampire aesthetics, military formal where adapted with dark, flowing sensibilities. The result made him look like a hybrid of a space naval officer and a gothic prince. Stop fidgeting, Cashin advised from behind him. The former trainer had become a reluctant but loyal friend over the past week of preparation. You faced the Queen in mortal combat. Surely a wedding cannot be more terrifying. At least in combat I knew what was trying to kill me, Marcus muttered. Have you seen the guest list? Half the noble houses are here hoping I'll spontaneously combust from proximity to ancient holy vampire artifacts or something. Only a third actually, Cashin corrected with a faint smile. The rest are genuinely curious about the human who successfully tamed our queen with words instead of swords. Through the tall windows, Marcus could see the 3 moons commencing their alignment, the identical configuration as during their duel. Tradition held it was the most auspicious moment for a royal wedding. Marcus's nerves suggested it was the most likely moment to make a fool of himself in front of all of vampire nobility. A knock interrupted his anxious thoughts. Enter, he called, expecting another advisor with last-minute protocol reminders. Instead, Valeria swept in and Marcus's breath caught completely. She wore a gown that appeared to be tailored from the very fabric of space, black deeper than the void itself, shot through with threads of silver that moved like captured starlight. Her hair was arranged in an intricate style that made her look both ancient and timeless. The crown of the crimson moon rested on her brow, its central ruby pulsing with an inner light that matched her eyes. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," she said, though she made no move to leave. "I think we've already shattered enough traditions," Marcus replied. "What's one more?" She moved closer and he caught her unique scent, that intoxicating blend of winter starlight and something wholly her own. The noble houses are agitated. Lord Draven, in particular, has been extremely vocal about the contamination of the royal bloodline. Charming. Should I be concerned about assassination attempts during the vows? Always, she said matter-of-factly. But that is not why I came here. She paused, seeming almost uncertain, an expression he'd rarely witnessed on her face. I wanted to ask you something. Are you certain about this? You could still depart. I could declare the combat inconclusive. Send you back to your old life. Marcus took her hands in his, noting how cool they perpetually felt, like touching moonlight. Valeria, I've been certain since the moment you dropped your sword in the arena. Maybe even since that night on the balcony. I called out to the void, remember? And the void sent me you. The void sent you a violent ancient creature who nearly killed you, she corrected. The void sent me someone who understands loneliness, Marcus said softly. Someone who has been wearing a mask for so long, she had forgotten there was a face underneath. I see that face, Valeria, and it is beautiful. For a fleeting moment, her careful composure completely fractured, and he saw the sheer vulnerability beneath centuries of isolation, of being seen as a symbol rather than a person. Then she smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise on a world that had known only perpetual darkness. How did a cargo pilot become so wise? She asked. Long flights give you a lot of time to think, he said. Also, I may have been reading vampire poetry to try to understand your culture. Did you know your people have 17 different words for loneliness? 18 actually, she corrected, then laughed at his expression. I'm joking. We only have 12. They were interrupted by another knock. This time it was a visibly flustered advisor. Your Majesty, you must not be here. The ceremony is in 1 hour, and tradition explicitly states. Tradition can wait 5 more minutes, Valeria declared with royal authority. The advisor retreated, mumbling about the violation of protocol. I should go, she said, yet remained stationary. There is one last thing. After the ceremony, after the celebration, will be our wedding night. Marcus felt a flush creep up his neck. I'm aware. It is different from that night before the combat, she continued. This will be binding. In vampire culture, the wedding night seals a profound connection. You will be able to sense my emotions and I yours. Some mortals find it overwhelming. Valeria, Marcus said gently. I am marrying a vampire queen on a planet that shouldn't exist in a nebula that defies physics. After surviving a duel I should have lost in seconds. I think I can handle a little emotional connection. She kissed him then, quick but fierce. 1 hour, Marcus Kane. Try not to get cold feet. In this temperature, my feet are already frozen, he countered. She laughed as she left, and Marcus was alone with his reflection and his swirling thoughts. 1 hour until he officially became the first human king of a vampire empire. No pressure. The ceremony itself was a blur of spectacle and sensation. The massive hall was packed with vampires from every corner of their empire. Nobles in elaborate garments that seemed to defy geometry, warriors in ceremonial armor that had seen battles before humanity reached the stars, and common citizens who had won viewing spots through a lottery. Marcus entered from one side as tradition demanded, walking a path lined with floating crystals that hummed with resonant frequencies. Every step felt like walking through living history. At the altar, a raised platform of living shadowstone that appeared to respond to emotion, waited the high priestess of the blood moon, a vampire so ancient that gazing at her directly was like trying to focus on the abstract concept of time itself. Then Valeria entered and the universe seemed to pause. She appeared to glide rather than walk, her gown flowing around her like liquid night. The assembled vampires bowed as she passed, not the perfunctory gesture subjects give a queen, but something deeper, a profound recognition of someone who had just permanently altered their world. When she reached the altar and took Marcus's hands, he felt the connection she had mentioned, a whisper of emotion, anticipation laced with something that might have been pure joy. The ceremony beautifully blended their disparate traditions. Marcus spoke his vows in English and heavily accented high vampiric, which he had practiced for days and still likely butchered. Valeria responded in kind, her vows containing promises that spanned both a mortal lifetime and a mortal eternity. They exchanged rings, his bearing the seal of earth, hers the sign of the crimson moon, both merged in a new design that would symbolize their joined houses. By the laws of the void and the blood of the ancient pact, the high priestess intoned, her voice like whispers from the dawn of time, these two are bound. Let none tear asunder what fate has brought together. Let the stars witness. The bloodlines are joined. When they kissed, the hall erupted in a sound that was part cheer, part ancient hunting cry, part harmonic resonance that made the crystals sing. Marcus felt the connection deepen, a palpable thread of consciousness that linked him to Valeria in a way he'd never imagined. He could feel her happiness, tinged with relief that they had successfully navigated this far. The celebration that followed was equally overwhelming. The great hall transformed into a reception area where vampires who had lived for millennia mingled with the single human who had upended their sacred traditions. Marcus found himself in conversation with beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, who spoke casually of events that were mere legends to humanity. So, the human king, Lord Draven said, approaching with a smile that failed to reach his eyes. Tell me, how long do you anticipate lasting? Your species lives, what, a mere century at best. Quality over quantity, Marcus replied diplomatically, though he could feel Valeria's anger through their new connection, her protective instinct flaring immediately. Indeed, Draven continued. And what quality can a mortal bring to an immortal throne? You cannot even survive our atmosphere without technology. How will you rule those who could crush you with a thought? Before Marcus could frame a response, Valeria was there, moving with that inhuman speed. Lord Draven, she said, her voice smooth as poisoned honey. Are you questioning my selection of consort? I merely point out the obvious challenges, Majesty, Draven replied, taking a cautious step back. Then permit me to point out something equally obvious, Valeria countered. My consort endured 6 minutes in combat with me. He revolutionized our most sacred tradition through wisdom rather than force. In 1 week, he has demonstrated more intelligence and adaptability than you have in 3 centuries. Perhaps the relevant question is not how he will rule, but how you will adapt to the new order he represents. Draven bowed stiffly and retreated. Through their connection, Marcus sent a pulse of profound gratitude. Valeria responded with what felt like a mental caress. As the celebration continued, Marcus noticed the subtle dynamics. The younger vampires were fascinated by him, asking questions about human philosophy and technology. The older ones remained reserved, watching him with calculating eyes. He was an unpredictable variable in their carefully ordered existence, and change moved slowly among immortals. You're performing well, Cassian said, appearing at his elbow with drinks, wine for himself, and something Marcus had learned to tolerate despite its metallic aftertaste. Half the nobility expected you to flee by now. The night is still young, Marcus said, accepting the drink gratefully. Plenty of time for me to say something stupid and spark an interstellar incident. You survived the Queen's blade, Cassian reminded him. Words are far less dangerous. You haven't heard me try to pronounce high vampiric, Marcus countered. As if summoned by the mention of language, a young vampire approached. She couldn't have been more than a century old, practically a teenager by their standards. Your Majesty, she said, bowing to Marcus, which still felt surreal. Is it true that humans have a saying about calling into the void? Marcus smiled. We do. When you stare into the void stares back. Though in my case, the void answered with a marriage proposal. The young vampire laughed, a sound like silver bells. That's beautiful. May I share that with my poetry circle? Of course, Marcus said, intrigued by the idea of vampire poetry circles. The evening progressed, filled with ancient speeches, toasts with blood wine that Marcus politely pretended to drink, and formal dances with patterns older than human civilization. Throughout it all, the connection with Valeria hummed in the back of his mind, a constant, warm presence that made the strangeness manageable. Finally, as the crimson dawn began to break, Valeria took his hand. It is time, she said quietly, and Marcus felt a flutter of nervous anticipation through their bond, not just his but hers as well. They left the hall to a final round of cheers and what Marcus was fairly sure were rather bawdy suggestions whispered in ancient vampiric. The walk to their chambers no longer just hers, felt both endless and too short. The royal suite had been sumptuously prepared. Thousands of rose-like flowers, though black with silver-edged petals, lined a path to the bedchamber. Candles burning with cold fire cast dancing shadows. The bed itself was a work of art carved from what looked like crystallized starlight. Nervous? Valeria asked, and through their connection he could sense that she was asking herself as much as him. Terrified, Marcus admitted, but in the best possible way. She turned to face him, reaching up to remove the crown of the crimson moon. Without it she looked younger, more vulnerable. For 7 centuries I have ruled alone. I have taken lovers, yes, but never this. Never someone who would stand beside me for whatever time we have. Hey, Marcus said softly, pulling her close. We have now. That's what matters. They came together slowly, unlike the desperate passion of the night before the combat. This was exploration, discovery, 2 souls learning the true shape of each other. When Valeria bit him gently, just enough to break the skin, Marcus gasped, not from pain, but from the sudden, profound deepening of their connection. He could feel everything she felt, the centuries of loneliness washing away, the joy of finding someone who saw her as more than a crown, the lingering fear that this happiness couldn't last. He sent back his own emotions, his awe at her strength and beauty, his determination to stand beside her, and his growing love for the woman behind the title. They moved together, their consciousness blurring at the edges until it was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. Later, as they lay entwined, Valeria traced lazy patterns on his chest. The council will challenge you, she said. They will test your worthiness to rule. Let them come, Marcus said. I faced you in an arena. After that, a bunch of political vampires don't seem so scary. She laughed, the sound vibrating through their connection. You beautiful fool. Political vampires are far more dangerous than warrior ones. Then it's good I have an experienced queen to guide me, Marcus said. Together, remember? Together, she agreed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of eternity. Outside, the 3 moons continued their eternal dance. Inside, 2 souls who had called out to the void had found in each other an answer to loneliness, proof that love could bloom even in the darkest spaces between stars. The future would bring challenges, noble houses to placate, traditions to reshape, and the complex dance of mortal and immortal perspectives to navigate. But for now, in this moment, Marcus Kane, cargo pilot turned vampire king, held his queen close and marveled at the strange turns life could take. Sometimes, the best journeys were the ones you never planned. The first assassination attempt arrived 3 weeks after the wedding. It was disguised as a diplomatic gift. Marcus was in the council chambers, struggling through yet another session on vampire economic policy. Apparently, when your citizens live for centuries, compound interest becomes surprisingly complex. The ornate box that arrived was beautiful, carved from what looked like frozen moonlight and allegedly sent by House Shadow as a belated wedding present. Through their bond, Marcus felt Valeria's sudden spike of alarm from across the palace. Her warning came a heartbeat before his own instincts kicked in, and he dove sideways just as the gift exploded into a swarm of shadow wasps, creatures of living darkness whose stings could paralyze even a vampire. Shields! Cashin roared, throwing himself between Marcus and the swarm. The royal guards reacted with centuries of training, instantly forming a protective barrier. As Marcus scrambled for cover, the council chamber erupted into chaos. Some nobles drew weapons, others fled, and a suspicious few seemed remarkably unsurprised by the attack. Marcus grabbed an ornamental sword from the wall, mostly decorative but certainly better than nothing, and frantically tried to recall his training for combat in enclosed spaces. The shadow wasps moved like smoke given malevolent purpose, flowing effortlessly around the guards' traditional defenses. One guard collapsed, then another, their bodies instantly rigid with paralysis. Through the bond, Marcus felt Valeria's blistering fury in her rapid approach, but she was in a distant wing of the palace. The window! Marcus shouted, a desperate idea forming. Drive them toward the window. Cashin immediately grasped the command. Using controlled, short bursts from their energy weapons, the remaining guards began herding the swirling swarm toward the massive stained glass window that depicted the first vampire queen. Marcus seized a heavy council ledger, 1,000-year-old tax records have to be good for something, and hurled it straight through the glass. The window shattered in a cascade of crimson shards, and the sudden change in air pressure created a powerful vortex that sucked the shadow wasps out into the thin, hostile atmosphere of the vampire world. They immediately dissipated like smoke in a hurricane, their forms unable to maintain cohesion in the extreme environment. Well, Marcus said, breathing hard. That was exciting. Lord Draven rose slowly from behind an overturned table, his expression unreadable. How extraordinarily fortunate that our human king knew precisely how to handle shadow wasps, almost as if he anticipated them. Before Marcus could respond, Valeria arrived, moving so fast she seemed to have teleported. Her powerful presence filled the room like a sudden storm front, invisible arcs of power crackling around her. Her eyes blazed as she surveyed the damaged, the injured guards and finally her husband. Who? The single word carried the immense weight of centuries of royal authority. A nervous silence descended upon the chamber. Then one of the younger nobles, Lady Corvina, stepped forward. The box bore House Shadow's seal majesty, but But Shadow has been extinct for 50 years, Valeria finished. Someone used their seal hoping to muddy the waters. She moved straight to Marcus, checking him for injuries with hands that trembled slightly. Through their bond, he felt her enormous relief warring with volcanic rage. I'm fine, he assured her quietly. Though I think we need to discuss upgrading the mail screening process. Despite the situation, she almost smiled. Then her expression hardened as she addressed the room. Let me be absolutely clear. My consort is under my direct protection. Any attack on him is an attack on me, on the throne, on the very foundation of our empire. I will regard it as personally as if someone had driven a stake through my own heart. Your Majesty, Lord Draven said smoothly. Surely you cannot fault the nobility for being concerned. A human on the throne introduces unique vulnerabilities. Today's attack proves that someone in this room is a traitor. Valeria cut him off. Shadow wasps require specific containment. Someone had to prepare that box, knowing precisely when and where it would be opened. Someone with access to council schedules. The room temperature dropped dramatically. Several nobles shifted uncomfortably. But perhaps, Valeria continued, her voice deceptively calm, the traitor did us a favor. They have demonstrated that my consort can think instantly under pressure, that he values vampire lives above his own safety, and that he understands our world better than they assumed. Not bad for a mere human, wouldn't you say, Lord Draven? That evening, in their private chambers, Valeria paced like a caged predator while Marcus sat on the bed, sipping a glass of specially imported earth whiskey. They will not cease, she declared. This was merely the beginning. The conservative houses view you as a vulnerability to exploit, a means to challenge my rule without directly confronting me. Then we need to change their perception, Marcus said. Show them I'm an asset, not a liability. How? She spun to face him. You cannot match them physically. The politics in our world invariably result in bloodshed. Then I won't play by vampire rules, Marcus stated. I'll play by human ones. We're not faster or stronger, but we've survived because we're adaptable, creative, and extremely good at forming alliances. Over the next month, Marcus initiated what he privately named Operation Hearts and Minds. Instead of trying to out-vampire the vampires, he leaned heavily into his humanity. He started with the younger nobles, the ones born within the last 2 centuries who were more receptive to change. He introduced human concepts, democratic councils where age didn't automatically equate to authority, rotation of positions to prevent stagnation, and most revolutionarily, the concept of loyal opposition. You want us to argue? Lady Corvina asked during one of his informal gatherings. I want you to debate, Marcus corrected. In human politics, disagreement is not disloyalty. It means you care enough to engage. The best ideas come from conflict, not compliance. He also focused on the common vampires, the citizens who rarely saw their nobility except at formal events. Marcus instituted open palace days where citizens could bring grievances directly to the crown. Attendance was sparse at first. Who would trust a human king? But word spread quickly once Marcus actually solved problems. For a dispute over hunting grounds between 2 minor houses, Marcus proposed a rotation system based on sustainable population management. For a shortage of blood crystals in the outer provinces, he suggested mutually beneficial trade agreements with neighboring systems, exchanging advanced vampire technology for resources. You are thinking like a mere merchant, Lord Draven sneered during a council session. I'm thinking like someone who wants the empire to thrive, Marcus countered. Your isolation has protected you, but it has also limited you. There is an entire universe out there, and not all of it wants to kill us. The second assassination attempt was subtle, poison in the blood wine during a state dinner. Marcus survived only because Valeria insisted on testing everything he consumed. The third was a training accident, where centuries-old equipment mysteriously failed. The fourth involved a corrupted hologram that nearly drove him mad with subliminal imagery designed to shatter the human psyche. Each time, Marcus survived through a combination of Valeria's vigilant protection, his own increasing paranoia, and what Cassian had begun calling human luck. The uncanny ability to somehow stumble into survival against overwhelming odds. But it was the 5th attempt that changed everything. Marcus was visiting the Archive of Shadows, the vast library containing vampire history dating back to their exodus from their dying homeworld. He had been researching precedents for human-vampire alliances when Lord Draven appeared with several other conservative nobles. Studying our history, human? Draven asked. Looking for weaknesses? Looking for wisdom, Marcus replied, not glancing up from the ancient text. Your ancestors were remarkable. Did you know they once allied with the Zerati Republic, the same species you now consider inferior? Times change, one of Draven's companions said. Or we change times to suit our prejudices, Marcus countered. The attack, when it came, was instant. Draven moved with elder vampire speed, a blade materializing in his hand. But Marcus had been waiting for this, having felt the building tension through his bond with Valeria. He rolled aside, letting Draven's strike shatter the reading podium. Finally showing your true colors? Marcus asked, backing away as the other nobles spread out to flank him. You have corrupted our queen with your human weakness. Draven snarled. She was magnificent in her isolation, pure in her power. Now she speaks of alliances, of change, of opening our borders to lesser species. You have poisoned her mind. I've loved her, Marcus said simply. Something you never could do because you only saw the crown, not the woman wearing it. Draven attacked again, and this time Marcus couldn't fully dodge. The blade caught his shoulder, sending him spinning into a massive bookshelf. Ancient tomes crashed down around him as he struggled to maintain consciousness. You think your pathetic love matters? Draven advanced, savoring the moment. She'll forget you in a century. You're a phase, a momentary madness. I'm saving her from future regret. Marcus laughed, surprising everyone, including himself. You really don't understand her at all, do you? Through their bond, he had been broadcasting everything. The location, the attack, Draven's confession. Valeria's rage was a psychic scream that made him wince. But he also felt her distance. She was coming, but not fast enough. What's so funny, dying human? Draven raised his blade for the killing blow. You think you're saving her from regret? Marcus said, pulling himself up despite the pain. But you're the one who's going to regret not checking the archive's emergency protocols, Marcus countered. Draven hesitated, confusion flashing across his features. Marcus smiled and spoke a single word in High Vampiric, a specific command phrase he'd memorized during his studies. The archive's ancient defenses instantly activated. Suddenly, every shadow in the vast library became solid, animate, and hostile to anyone threatening violence within the sacred space. Shadow tendrils erupted from every corner, wrapping around Draven and his conspirators like living chains. The Archive of Shadows protects knowledge and those who seek it, Marcus said, leaning against the shelf for support. You should have read the user manual. Valeria arrived moments later with a contingent of royal guards. She took in the scene, her husband bleeding but victorious, the conspirators trapped by their own ignorance of ancient protocols. Her expression was a terrifying blend of pride and volcanic fury. Lord Draven, she said, her voice eerily calm. You stand accused of attempted regicide, conspiracy against the crown, and violation of sacred space. How do you plead? I plead necessity. Draven struggled against the shadow bonds. You've been bewitched by this outsider. I acted to save the Empire. You acted from jealousy and fear, Valeria corrected. And in doing so, you have proven exactly why change is essential. You are so trapped by tradition you couldn't even remember that our oldest defenses don't distinguish between vampire and human, only between those who seek knowledge and those who bring violence. The trial was swift by vampire standards, lasting only a week. Draven and his core conspirators were found guilty, their sentences ranging from exile to stasis imprisonment. More importantly, the failed coup had an unexpected effect on vampire society. Marcus's survival, not through brute vampire strength, but through human cunning and respect for vampire heritage, irrevocably shifted perceptions. The younger generations openly admired his resourcefulness. Scholars respected his dedication to understanding their culture. Even some conservative houses began to reluctantly reconsider their stance. You played the long game, Cashin observed one evening as they watched the three moons set. You knew someone would eventually attack you in the archives. I suspected, Marcus admitted. Draven wasn't subtle. I just made sure I was prepared when he made his move, using our own traditions against those who claim to uphold them. Cashin smiled. Very human. Very effective. A month after the trial, Marcus stood before the full council, proposing his most ambitious plan yet. The Dark Nebula has been our sanctuary, he began. But sanctuaries can become prisons. I propose we establish a treaty with the Galactic Coalition, not full membership but a mutual defense and trade agreement. We offer our technology and military expertise. They offer resources and cultural exchange. You want to end our isolation, Lady Corvina said, though now it sounded less like a criticism and more like an exciting challenge. I want to give us options, Marcus corrected. Isolation should be a choice, not our only survival strategy. We are strong enough to engage with the universe on our terms. The debate raged for hours. Marcus navigated between traditionalists and progressives, building consensus through thoughtful compromise. In the end, the vote was close but decisive enough to matter. The Vampire Empire would open its borders, cautiously, selectively but definitively. That night, as he and Valeria watched the triple moons dance, she pulled him close. "You've changed us," she said softly. "In less than a year, you've altered the course of an empire that stood rigid for millennia." "Change was coming anyway," Marcus replied. "I just helped guide it. Besides, someone once told me that immortals need mortals to remind them that time has meaning." "Wise woman," Valeria murmured. "The wisest," Marcus agreed. Through their bond, he felt her love, her pride, and a powerful surge of hope. For the first time in centuries, the vampire queen looked to the future with anticipation rather than mere endurance. The assassination attempts would continue, but they became less frequent, less supported. The old guard was learning that the human king was not a weakness to exploit, but a strength to be reckoned with. He might not live forever, but the changes he'd initiated would outlast any single lifetime. The arena where Marcus and Valeria had first fought stood empty under the crimson dawn. Its obsidian floor still bore the scar where she had driven her sword. Today it would witness another historic moment, not a combat for marriage but a battle for the soul of an empire. Marcus stood in the center, no longer the frightened human who had stumbled through a portal. Months of training, survival, and political maneuvering had transformed him. He wore armor blending human engineering with vampire craftsmanship, and the sword at his side was forged from metals found in both Earth and the Dark Nebula. Around the arena's edges, thousands gathered, including delegations from the Zarati Republic, the Andromedan Alliance, and a small group of humans from the Galactic Coalition. The treaty negotiations had gone well, but the old guard had demanded one final test. "You seek to bind our fate to outsiders," Lord Thraven, a prominent conservative, had declared in council. Then prove these alliances have strength. Face our champions in combat, not to the death, but to demonstrate that cooperation between species can stand against our traditional might. It was a clever trap. Refusal would make him seem weak. Acceptance and loss would undermine everything. But Marcus had learned to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. "I accept," he had said. "On one condition, I don't fight alone. If we're testing the strength of alliances, then let me stand with allies." Now as the crowd settled, Valeria approached him. Even after all these months, her presence still took his breath away. Through their bond, he felt her concern mixed with profound pride. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I could forbid it as queen and undo everything we've built." Marcus shook his head. "They need to see this, Valeria. Not just that I can survive, but that the future we're proposing can triumph over the past they're clinging to." She kissed him, fierce and quick. Then show them, my love. Show them what humans bring to the darkness." The traditional horn sounded, and Lord Thraven entered the arena with two other ancient vampires. Each possessed centuries of combat experience, their movements flowing like liquid shadow. "Choose your companions, human king," Thraven called out. "Let us see what strength your precious alliances bring." Marcus raised his hand and two figures joined him. The first was Cassian, vampire trained but loyal to the future Marcus represented. The second caused gasps throughout the crowd. Commander Zara Quinn, the human military attaché who had arrived with the coalition delegation. "A vampire who embraces change and a human soldier," Thraven mocked, "against three who have perfected the art of war over millennia? This will be educational." "Yes," Marcus agreed calmly. "It will." "It will," Marcus affirmed. The combat commenced with shocking suddenness. Thraven's companions split to the flanks, attempting a classic pincer movement, while the ancient lord himself charged straight up the center. It was a textbook vampire hunting pattern designed to overwhelm the prey from multiple angles. But Marcus had dedicated months to studying their tactical patterns. As Thraven charged, Marcus threw a small device provided by Zara, a gravity disruptor that created a localized field of increased mass. Thraven, expecting normal physics, suddenly found himself moving through what felt like thick molasses. Cassian immediately engaged the vampire on the left, their combat a blur of traditional vampire forms meeting innovative human military adaptations. Zara faced the one on the right, her powered armor compensating for the strength differential while her tactical algorithms predicted their opponent's attack patterns with startling accuracy. Technology. Thraven snarled, forcing his way through the gravity field by sheer raw strength. "You rely on tricks. I rely on intelligence," Marcus corrected, dancing backward. "Something you've confused with tradition for far too long." The battle raged across the arena floor. Where the ancient vampires relied on perfected patterns, the allied team brought unpredictability. Cassian would begin a classical vampire strike only to abort mid-motion into a human grappling technique. Zara's armor adapted to each attack, learning and compensating. Marcus, coordinating them through tactical implants, turned three individuals into a unified fluid force. When Thraven's ally tried to use the arena's shifting floors against Zara, she activated magnetic locks that kept her stable while the vampire stumbled. When they attempted to utilize super speed, Marcus deployed flashbang grenades calibrated specifically to overwhelm vampire vision, buying precious seconds of disorientation. "You fight without honor," one of the ancients accused, blood seeping from a wound where Cashin's blade had found a gap. "We fight to win," Cashin replied. "Honor means nothing if you're too rigid to survive change." The turning point arrived when the three ancients attempted their ultimate technique, a coordinated, synchronized assault that had never failed in 2 millennia of combined experience. It should have created an inescapable web of death. Should have been. Marcus, Zara, and Cashin did the one thing the ancients couldn't have anticipated. They didn't try to escape. Instead, they moved toward the center of the pattern, inside the optimal strike range, turning the vampire's perfect coordination into a catastrophic liability. They were suddenly too close to use their long weapons effectively, too committed to the pattern to adapt instantly. The ancients faltered. In that crucial moment of confusion, the allied team struck, not to kill but to prove a point. Cashin's blade stopped a hair's breadth from his opponent's throat. Zara's plasma weapon hummed against another's chest. And Marcus himself stood directly behind Thraven, his sword resting against the ancient vampire's neck. "Yield," Marcus said quietly. The arena held its breath. For Thraven to yield was to publicly acknowledge that the new ways could defeat the old, that cooperation could triumph over isolation. Marcus could feel the ancient vampire's internal struggle through the tactical net, centuries of pride warring against the undeniable reality of cold steel at his neck. "There's no shame in evolution," Marcus said, loud enough for all the delegations to hear. "Your ancestors left their dying world and adapted to the dark nebula. They changed to survive. Now it's your turn." Thraven closed his eyes. "I yield." The crowd erupted, not the unified roar of the marriage combat, but a complex symphony of shock, admiration, anger, and hope, all mingled together. The old guard had publicly lost to the alliance of species they'd opposed. As the combatants separated, Thraven turned to Marcus. "You fight like no warrior I've ever faced." "Because I'm not a warrior," Marcus replied. "I'm a survivor and I'm teaching your people the difference." The aftermath of the combat rippled through vampire society like seismic waves. Opposition to the treaties crumbled. The formal vote in the council was almost anticlimactic. The treaty passed by a margin that would have been unthinkable months earlier. "You realize what you've done?" Valeria asked that night on their private balcony. The aurora of the dark nebula painted the sky in sheets of red and gold. "Changed everything," Marcus suggested. "Saved us," she corrected. "We were dying, Marcus. Stagnation disguised as tradition. Isolation disguised as strength. You've given us a future." "We've given us a future," he corrected, pulling her close. "I could never have done this without you. The human who called to the void, and the vampire who answered. The poets will have a field day with our story," she mused. "Speaking of the future," Marcus said, suddenly nervous despite everything. "There's something I've been researching. Vampire-human hybridization. The genetic compatibility issues. Turns out with some help from Zarati medical technology." Valeria turned in his arms, her eyes wide. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we can have more than just a political alliance," Marcus said. "Maybe we can create something new. Children who bridge both worlds who'll never have to choose between isolation and connection, because they'll embody both." Through their bond, he felt her joy bloom like a sudden sunrise, warm, overwhelming, and impossibly beautiful. "You impossible, wonderful human," she whispered. "You've already given me more than I dreamed possible, and still, you find ways to surprise me." "I have my moments," Marcus said, and she kissed him with enough passion to make his head spin. The ceremony finalizing the alliance treaty took place in the same arena where everything had begun. Representatives from a dozen species stood together, watching as Valeria and Marcus signed the documents that would reshape galactic politics. From isolation to integration, Valeria announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. From fear to friendship. From the darkness between stars, we step into the light of cooperation. As the crowd cheered, Marcus caught sight of Korvac, the six-armed bartender from Orion 7, who had somehow secured an invitation. "I knew you were destined for something special." Korvac called out, raising multiple glasses in salute. "It all started with your whiskey." Marcus called back. "Maybe I should put you on the diplomatic payroll." Later, Marcus found a quiet moment with Lord Thraven. "I spent centuries perfecting my combat," Thraven said. "You defeated me in months by refusing to fight on my terms. There's a lesson there, I suppose?" "The lesson is that perfection is a trap," Marcus replied. "Evolution means always being willing to learn, to adapt, to become something new. We're just continuing your ancestors' journey. Thraven was quiet for a moment. The queen chose better than she knew when she answered your call. Or maybe, Marcus said, watching Valyria coordinate between delegations with grace and authority, the universe just has a sense of humor about connecting the right people at the right time. On the balcony where their relationship truly began, Valyria intertwined her fingers with his. Any regrets? Marcus thought about his old life, the loneliness, the empty space. Only one, he said. Concern flickered through their bond. I regret that I didn't get drunk and propose to vampire royalty sooner, he finished with a wide grin. Valyria's laugh echoed across the palace, bright and free and full of joy. Careful, my love. There are other vampire queens out there. I might get jealous. Let them come, Marcus said, pulling her close. I've already found the one who answered my call. The void brought us together, and nothing in the universe will tear us apart. The empire that had hidden in darkness for millennia now stood ready to embrace the light, guided by a queen who had found love in the most unexpected place and a human king who had turned a drunken joke into destiny.